Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. I'm going to ask Katie what's happening in Iowa, but she's not even in Iowa today. So what's happening in Iowa and what's happening where you are, Katie?
My guess about what is happening in Iowa is that Jim has given up all tractors and sworn them off and is farming alpacas instead, and maybe alligators and avocados. I don't know, because I'm not there. I'm in New York City, in Times Square. When they said we were on Times Square, they meant it. You can see the ball drop tower thingummer from my hotel room window. Thankfully, this hotel is surprisingly well soundproofed, which is nice. I think I've probably seen more people in the last 2 days than I normally would in a year. So there's that. I'm here on a work trip. It's been really, really good to see all my coworkers. We've got 3.5 days of meetings coming up. And the whole hotel is full of finance people here for a conference. So hundreds and hundreds of identical looking white men in blue blazers. I swear to God, I saw one black blazer yesterday, but
And that was some diversity.
Yeah, it was some real diversity. So they are not my people. Let's just put it that way. Other than that, I think things are good. We went to a yarn store yesterday, so that was fun. And
this is Katie's version of living it up in New York.
Woo! We went to a bar last night. I had one beer over the course of 3 hours, and I untangled a bunch of yarn. So, yeah, it's been pretty wild.
Look out.
Woo! Yeah. How are things at your place, Arlene?
So, speaking of pretty wild, I have been spending the last week mostly in and out of the hospital. So, not for me. I'm doing just fine. But as I alluded to a while ago, I've been doing some supporting of other people. And this round, it was my dad. And so he has been very open about what's going on. So I feel like I can share, because anyone who came anywhere close to him in the last month or so would be told that he was getting his ribs cracked open. So he had triple bypass surgery and an aorta valve replacement last week. And so between my mom and my sisters and I, we've been doing a lot of time in the hospital with him, keeping him company and making sure that he's all good. So he spent several days in the ICU and is now in a regular room. So we've been trying to hang out there with him, because anyone who's had someone in the hospital knows that they get attention, they get looked after, but sometimes having an extra person around just to advocate for them makes things go a little bit smoother. I mean, things were great when he was in the ICU. The nurses there were fantastic, and he had one-on-one care, so we didn't really worry too much about there. But now that he's in a regular room, it's good to have somebody else around.
And he was real drugged up, wasn't he?
Surprisingly not. You know what? Day 1 after open heart surgery, he only had Tylenol. So that was a big shock to me. So he's pretty tough. He is saying he doesn't have a whole lot of pain. They took some of the vein that they needed to do the bypass out of his leg. So he said his leg is hurting him more than anything else, but still just Tylenol and farmer grit. So he's doing really well, and maybe we'll be back home in a couple of days. So then that will, I'm guessing, be another level of support, but then we will figure that out when the time comes. So I'm back home for a couple of days because one of my sisters is going to take a shift. And so, yeah, it's been interesting because, when I'm away from home, my boys in particular, they'll reach out once in a while if they need something, but they're not the type who want to FaceTime or, I don't get a lot of messages, but I do get some big hugs when I get back. So that's good. I know they miss me. And my oldest, well, I know that they have all been pitching in to fill in for the jobs that I usually do. So my oldest has been milking and the others have been doing extra chores. So it's nice to know that everybody is old enough now to kind of rally around and help. And so, yeah, Not the most exciting week, but I've been doing a lot of reading while he naps, so that's kind of relaxing, I guess. Yeah, that's been the week.
It feels like a very abnormal week for both of us.
Yes, yeah, for sure. We're both doing things kind of outside of our comfort zone, but we're making it happen. Well, and right now we're in the same time zone, and Katie and I both got up early so that we could talk to each other because of our irregular week. It's been tricky to find a time to record. So if you're on Patreon, you get to see me in my pajamas and Katie with freshly showered hair. So enjoy that.
Yeah, but with yesterday's t-shirt on because I'm old enough that I have to wear compression socks if I'm going to walk this much, which is fine. But putting compression socks, knee-high compression socks on wet feet took even longer than I had allotted for, which was already quite a long time. It was really quite a battle.
So your getting ready routine doesn't include as much makeup and hairstyling, but more just getting into compression wear.
I put on makeup yesterday.
Ooh.
I might put on mascara again today. I don't know. Probably not.
It is a big week.
The upside for working in a male-dominated tech industry is that our standards of fanciness are very low. And our dress code is pretty much work t-shirts and are you wearing pants? And that's really about it.
Yes. Are you dressed? All right.
Yeah. Some of my coworkers are pretty fancy, and we appreciate that for them. We have a very accepting workplace. Let's just put it that way. No blue blazers anywhere to be seen.
Unless someone wanted to wear a blue blazer, they'd be okay if they wanted to blend in with all the finance dudes.
If you wanted to, we would totally support you in that. We just probably would not join you in that.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and introduce our guest for this week?
All right. Sounds good.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. We are doing a 4-person interview today, so things might get complicated, but we'll try our best. So today we're talking to Kristina Villa, who is joining us from Tennessee, and Ian McSweeney, who is joining us from New Hampshire. So we get 2 new states to add to our map, which is very exciting for us. So Kristina and Ian, we always start each of our interviews with the same question. So I'm going to start with you, Kristina, and this is a way to introduce yourself to our listeners. So we always ask, what are you growing? So that can be crops and livestock and kids, but also careers, businesses, and all kinds of other stuff. So, Kristina, what are you growing?
So many things. The garlic crop is looking vibrant and gorgeous and beautiful, and the peas are making fresh, juicy looking peas. There's also some baby bunnies growing to completion, and I'm looking forward to tanning their hides and turning them into something fun and beautiful. And also a 4-year-old little boy who has an amazing vocabulary, and I'm finding to be such a capable little human since he gets to grow up on a farm. And also this Farmland Commons movement that I'm excited to get to tell you more about with the Farmers Land Trust.
That is a lot of different things. And so you're the one who's in Tennessee. How many rabbits are we talking about, and what do you typically do with them?
Just a tiny amount. I'm actually a cow person. Like, we have a herd of dairy cows and we have a herd share.
Oh, so you're also growing those? Yeah.
Yes. Like, I am definitely a cow person, but I was gifted a rabbit and it was pregnant, and then I ended up with all these bunnies, and then I processed a couple of them to feed to my family, and ended up with the hides, which then I tanned out of. I've never done that in my life, but then I just became obsessed with how luxurious the rabbit hides were. So then I was like, I have to start breeding these. So now I have like 10 baby bunnies. And yeah, I don't know how I have also become a rabbit person, but I really like to think of myself as a cow person, not a rabbit person.
Gotcha. So you didn't even include the cows. How many cows are we talking about as well?
We have 20, and we hand milk just like 2 per season. And then we have a herd share. So we have people who come to our farm to pick milk up, because here in Tennessee, raw milk is illegal. But, through a herd share, that legal documentation makes it okay to sell milk to people. So it makes it be so that the public actually owns a portion of the cow, so that it's their cow and they are legally just paying us to milk it. And it's funny because I've had dairy cows for about a decade now. And I remember getting a first dairy cow because, well, so we grow and eat all of our own food and are very serious about that. And that is like one of the most important things in my life, is that we grow and then we can and we freeze and we ferment and we dry and we like eat all the food that we grow here. But the dairy was just like a really big missing part of our diet. And so I was like, well, I have to get a dairy cow. And everyone around me was like, you're not going to like this. This isn't going to be fun for you. You don't understand the work that goes into a dairy cow. But I got a dairy cow and it became my obsession. I love the dairy cow. I love the dairy cow. I love the meditation it gives you twice a day. I love that thing that it becomes to like hold on to. Like, no matter what happens in life, no matter how crazy life gets, I will always go back to that cow in the morning and at night, no matter what. Like, that is a constant. And that feeling of like security and groundedness in the dairy cow is, and also the cowness, like cow energy is just so chill. Like, they are so confident in who they are and comfortable in their cowness. Like, everything about a cow just like exudes calmness to me and like connection with earth and nature, and I just love it so much. And it's really hard though, because then you don't get to go on vacation. It's also physically demanding to milk cows, and then you end up with all this milk. And like, when I first got a dairy cow a decade ago, I remember being overrun with milk and not knowing what I was going to do with it all. I was like begging people. I was like, try raw milk. It's so good for you. You're going to love it. I was like, everything about it is so wonderful. And I was like having to convince people to like take this milk from me. And now, eventually I started selling it. But now it's hilarious because I have a waiting list like out the door for the raw milk. Like, the table is completely turned. Like, it started out as me trying to convince people like, hey, this is good for you. This is a great thing, to now it's like the demand is so incredible. And I feel like that speaks to our farming practices and also our community building and just a lot of good things that happen when you put people and land and earth and animals together in harmonious, reciprocating relationships.
Yeah, I'm someone who milked cows this morning too, so I hear you on the going back to it. And no matter how you feel or how early it is or what the weather is or any of those things, you're still in the barn with your cows.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
So you talked about a couple things that are currently growing, but it sounds like other than peas and garlic, you're also growing a bunch of other things. What other vegetables and maybe fruit are you growing on your farm?
Yeah, so we do, we sell to restaurants and grocery stores, and then we also sell in bulk to other CSAs. And so we don't manage a CSA ourselves anymore because we've just found, like, there's so much work in managing a CSA, and also the amount of CSAs that are available and the types of ways that you can access a CSA. Like, I think that the original CSA movement was so wonderful in so many ways, but I feel like now it is just so much easier to aggregate food and give it to the consumers in other ways, like a grocery store. I feel like we're all going back to like, let's support local food in grocery stores. Like, what a novel idea. And so we sell a lot of vegetables in those ways to restaurants, to grocery stores, and to other CSAs. And so the potatoes, we are growing a ton of potatoes, and they are looking really gorgeous. Beets and carrots are coming up, and let's see. Oh, tomatoes are in the ground. We only planted like 200 this year because, everyone grows tomatoes. It just seems like everyone has tomatoes, and that's not really like a thing that people want to buy a lot of because they're like, oh, I have plenty of tomatoes. I said 200. I'm sorry. I meant to say we only planted 400 tomatoes this year. But anyway, two sections of 200. We planted 400 tomatoes total. Anyway, not a lot. Doesn't matter. But yeah, so we are just, growing food, doing that thing. And then fruit we grow, but only for ourselves. So we do have some blueberries and June berries and, here and there things, but like those just go into our freezer or get canned for our root cellar. And like, those are things that we save for our family. It's just like so much energy and time to grow fruit, especially in this region where I live. And because we value the food that we grow so much ourselves, like I couldn't even put a price on a quart of blueberries if I was going to sell them. It would have to be $1 million. Like, there would be no way. So we have to save all the fruit for ourselves.
Kristina, quick question. Do you sleep at all? And how much caffeine are you consuming? Is it a lot, or is this just what you're like? And like, no shame, because
I feel like I have always been told that I do too many things, or like I need to rest, or I need to relax, or or said like, how do you do so many things in a day? And I really feel like everything is so exciting in all directions, and there are so many opportunities to do cool things and have new experiences and see beauty in life and create beauty for others. It's like, why would I not want to just do that all the time? But I do feel like I have this sort of like, I don't know, I am starting to feel like in my adult life, like I have this kind of superpower to like somehow extract more hours out of a day than other people have. I do feel like that. And I'm like, what is the difference? Like, maybe it's because we don't have a television and we don't watch TV. So like that saves me time. I don't know, but I do feel like I'm able to like find more time in a day than other people somehow.
it's because you're sleeping 45 minutes a day, isn't it? I'm just picturing you now, like laying down like one of those cartoon vampires that just lays there with its eyes wide open and then just like bouncing back up 45 minutes later and just like running back out the door.
Oh my God.
I get that.
So, Ian, now you get to answer the question. And however you choose to, from your place in New Hampshire, what are you growing?
Yeah, great question. So a variety of things. And really at home for me and us, family, 2 young boys who are at the stage of 15, so high school this year, just prom this last weekend, that growth stage into teenage and wanting to be pushing on creating adulthood is fun, interesting, and that's a huge growth stage. And then an 11-year-old brother who's like wanting to be that same age and, testing at a different stage of adolescence and growth, but wanting to be a teenager as well. So fun seeing them grow into the beings they are and kind of move into life in different ways. And so, yeah, really enjoy being a dad in that level, seeing them grow out of that dependent stage in many ways is nice. That a little more time and space and independence for each one of us at home to take on different projects. At home, we don't have a farm. We've leased our farm out for years to diversified CSA vegetable farmers. But we focus on kind of perennial food production. So have a lot of blueberries and pursuing that $1 million market in Tennessee on the blueberries, but have a lot of blueberries both planted and then a lot of wild blueberries that we kind of manage forest land to encourage their growth. And so it's wild to see some of those wild blueberry bushes that are now 20 feet tall and kind of in the understory of forest, but still just with more light and space getting so enormous. And great to see all the pollination this spring. Like we, for the past 3 or 4 years now, have had like a late snowstorm frost that's wiped out all the flowers on the fruit trees and blueberries we have. We had 2 late storms in April this year, but one was not long enough and one was before flowering out. So there's really no damage at home, and there's no damage that I've heard of in southern New Hampshire, where past few seasons it's decimated peach crops and blueberry crops and other things for many farmers, where hopefully this year it's different, but we didn't lose any flowers, pollination then. And it's just great to see that activity at home. We do a lot to store the landscape as well for kind of different ornamental flowers and beauty in that way. And so it's really a haven for birds and bees and wildlife. So it's great to see all that spring emergence in so many ways, and love that stage of life, kind of the annual cycle of things, that rebirth, the letting go of things, the kind of natural awe of what develops, what unfolds, what blooms each spring, and how that carries forward into the year ahead is really beautiful. That kind of this time of year has been kind of transitional in work-wise in a number of ways over the years. That, as Kristina mentioned, this Farmland Commons Model, we kind of created the organization we're at now this year or last year this time. So that's kind of significant to live into now, a year of emerging growth of new organization. 5 years ago this time, we created this common structure, the Farmland Commons, that we're now carrying forward, and kind of brought that as an idea and a concept to the United States in many ways. And we can talk more about that, but that growth over just a handful of years now is amazing to see it developing in local communities in different ways by communities around the United States. So that reminder of that seed of growth that was planted in creating those commons, and also in just the conversation with people who are now re-engaging or carrying forward things on their own to create these commons-based structures, is really inspiring in so many ways. And so love kind of that reflective point that we're in now of what emerges, and growth wise for us, it's really great to see all these conversations and growth and kind of willingness to step forward in this way. So yeah, grateful for all that's growing in those ways.
So I feel like I'm in with the cool kids now, because I actually planted some blueberries this year too. So Arlene, you better get on board with this. I have no belief that they will actually grow or do anything, but I have a little boy who was quite insistent that we were going to grow blueberries. So I only planted 2 because I refuse to get too far into something that is being guided by a 6-year-old. So where did you guys both grow up, and what is your ag background?
Can I just go back and add a little bit to something? Because this is another thing that I just think about a lot. Like, you guys were like, oh, like, you must not sleep, or like, how do you do so much? And I do feel like everything I said is, like, true. Like, I do feel like I'm able to squeeze a lot of time out in a day, like all these things. But also I think even more importantly and bigger than that is that I have a lot of help. Like, I have so much help from a very supportive community of people. Like, my mother-in-law is very helpful in watching my child. I have 3 different people in addition to her who come and help watch and take care of my little boy, who are like friends, like, who are part of our community and like part of the thing we have going on here. And there is like, my husband is the one who really is the farmer and makes the farm happen. Like, he really holds that and carries that. And then we have a farm hand who works with us on the farm. So like, supports all of the harvesting and washing and like taking things. And then I feel like that's true with our work too, is that, the things that we have done and have been able to do in the places that we are already, obviously, like, yeah, Ian and I are hard workers and carry vision and like focus and attention, but also like, we have been so greatly supported by so many amazing networks, individuals, people throughout the country and actually around the world who have shown up to help us carry this work and vision forward. And I just think it's really important. Like, yeah, alone we go so fast, but together we go so far, I think, is one of those sayings that is just really resonates with me because of how I feel so part of and supported by community in every aspect of my life and work.
I feel like, too, Kristina, I hope it didn't come across that I was judging you for being one of those people who does so much, because I am, if left to my own devices, very much the same way. And honestly, through working with a life coach who kept asking, well, if you do X, what are you going to give up? If you do this thing, what are you going to give up to do that thing? And I was like, give something up? Like, what kind of negativity is this? And I know a lot of folks are like, you're so busy, you have to stop doing some of those things. I'm like, which one am I going to choose? Like, so if you're a person who can't choose, you just add more things instead. I feel like somehow it works out.
Yeah, no, I actually took it as a compliment. Like, it's something I'm really proud of, but also, since you brought it up, I'm just going to elaborate on that, like, yeah, like, my husband would probably say that I'm a total ball of stress to live with. And, like, the fact that I have a hard time stopping and relaxing or stopping and resting leads to tensions and difficulties in other ways, because, yeah, we actually only have 24 hours. And, like, what are we going to choose to spend our time on? And so when you don't make time for relationships, or you don't make time for rest, and you end up getting sick because of that, and like what you're willing to do for others that then takes time away from your home. So yeah, there's a lot of tension and stress about that, and it's hard because like the public only sees like, wow, they're killing it, they're doing awesome, but like within yourself or like within your family, they're like, this is stressful.
So, okay, ag backgrounds. Ian, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in this small town, Halifax, Massachusetts. Always asked from people not from Massachusetts if it was Nova Scotia, but no, grew up in Massachusetts on a kind of small homestead farm. Parents worked off farm. It was to produce most of our food, but it was a hobby of theirs. I grew up also surrounded by this several thousand acres of farmland and natural land that was acquired by this, at initial point in time, a dairy farm that grew to become an industrial farm, grew to develop these convenience stores and gas stations throughout the Northeast. But they bought all this land and completely degraded it for dumping manure, growing silage corn, and just rerouting water, wetlands, and such. So I grew up surrounded by this land that was, when I was little, was just completely being changed by bulldozers and dump trucks. And so cool and neat to see all, big trucks moving earth and damming water and such. But what happened there led to town and then state and then U.S. Supreme Court taking action and in favor of the environment and updating the Clean Water Act to protect inland waterways. And so as I was in high school, I saw that context of the legal challenges and the reality of the impact to the land and how kind of industrial ag can destroy the environment in so many ways, and how legal mechanisms can regulate that or mandate that in some ways, but it has only so much impact. Like I go back, my parents still live in that area, and I'll go back and see this land that is no longer an industrial ag and is reverting to natural, ecosystems, but it's 30 plus decades later, and it's still in a degraded state in some ways. So I grew up kind of seeing industrial ag impacting land around me, and then having homestead farm for years. Like my mother was a stay-at-home mother and farmed and was a midwife at times leaving the house, but was home a lot. So grew up with mother at home and food at home. And then kind of as I got into high school, my mother got a job and we kind of stopped. We moved houses and stopped that homestead farm. Still had more of a garden, but no longer was I a kid like having to chase down pigs or sheep that had got away at, as we were trying to leave to go to some family event or something, and we're waiting in the truck. That memory sticks with me, but didn't have that anymore, and just had kind of a garden at home for years. And then left home, went to New Hampshire for college, and moved around the country, and then resettled back in New Hampshire, and went through that same cycle in some ways. Like had animals more of a homestead farm for years when kids were younger, held the juggle and the chase of animals and that work. And it just, then kids and driving and different activities kind of pulled us further away from home in different ways, and, left to that kind of perennial food production landscape that we're focused on now.
And Kristina, what is your ag background then?
I have no ag background.
Fair enough.
Zero. Zero ag background ever. I remember this is making me think of the first time I ever saw peanuts growing. I was like 26 or something, and we were like, oh, let's grow peanuts for the first time. We're like planting these peanuts, and then when they started growing, I was like, what? This is how peanuts grow? Like, But like every crop has been like that. Like every time I see a crop grow for the first time, I'm like, this is magic. I had no idea this is what happens. This is crazy. It's like all brand new to me. It's all brand new to me. I have no ag background at all. No, I grew up in a like, you know, like city sort of area, and no one I knew grew anything ever, not even like a flower. Like I did not have any sort of indication of that. But and then I remember in high school, I knew people who were in FFA and they were so lame. Like I thought they were so lame. And like there was this one girl whose family had a farm, and we went there on a field trip, and it was just like a corn maze, and I was like, this is so boring. And that was like really my like ag background, you know? And then it was really as an act of rebellion against the system, you know, like capitalism and the world that we live in that is awful and exploits people and extracts from people and keeps people hungry. Like it was as an act of rebellion against that I was like, you know what? Screw you all. I'm going to grow my own food. I don't need you. It was like that sort of mentality. So I just started a garden knowing nothing about growing food or gardening. And then I got addicted. The bug hit me, you know, it was like, and then it's like, well, once you start, you just like can't stop. And then it becomes this obsession that snowballs out of control. And, you know, one day you're living in this beautiful suburban home with a cute little 20 by 20 garden. And the next thing you're on a farm, milking cows twice a day, like covered in mud, you know, like, I don't know. It just like spiraled out of control very quickly. Yeah, I was like, I grew this garden, had so much abundance. And then I was like, I want to learn how to grow so much more of this. But also at that time, like, I'm sure you all hear this too. Like everyone around me in that like suburban lifestyle I was living in were always talking about someday I'm going to buy land and have a farm. Someday I'm going to grow all my own food. Like everyone was always saying that. And I was like, this is so annoying. Like, why does no one just do it? I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to like, because really what is the, like, what are we waiting for? Or like, what are the changes that we're expecting to happen over long term? Like I didn't know, and I couldn't, and I was just like so frustrated with seeing that in everyone else. And I didn't want to be that. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to dive in. So I literally like sold all of my possessions, including the house and car and like all, you know, and then moved to the oldest and largest farm in Tennessee. And I lived in a barn for a year to like learn how to farm. And that is my ag background.
I think what it is that like creative maker people always have that maker energy. But since you didn't use it for like the first how many years, that's why you have so much energy now, is you've like burning off all this excess energy from your youth. But I like too when chicken math goes from like 1 potted tomato to 20 dairy cows. Like that's some big time chicken math right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So can one or both of you explain what the Farmers Land Trust is? I mean, hopefully both of you can, since you're like running it, but
and hopefully we can with the same answer too, right? Is it?
Yeah, maybe you won't. Who knows? This is going to be the end of the Farmers Land Trust when we find out that they're like totally diverging on what they're doing here. All right, either of you, go for it.
So, a land trust in general. There's conservation land trusts and there's community land trusts. Conservation land trusts have a focus primarily on the natural environment and the protection of that. Community land trusts in general have a focus on affordable housing and the built environment. What the Farmers Land Trust is, and what we created with this Farmland Commons model, is looking at both conservation and community land trusts and pulling aspects from both to address farmland ownership, equity, and tenure, and to address that balance of local control, national support, resources, guidance in different ways. So what the Farmers Land Trust is in some ways similar to any other land trust. It's a nonprofit entity, a 501c3 nonprofit that works for the public good. The public good being protecting, preserving, holding land, natural assets for the benefit of public ecosystem, community resources. The Farmers Land Trust uniquely holds farmland for the benefit of regenerative agriculture and equity and tenure and security for farmers. So we work as a nonprofit, raising money through donations and grants, and then using that money to raise awareness, provide education, provide direct support, assistance, and guidance, and to manifest the legal incorporation of these nonprofit farmland common structures in community, and then the real estate transactional work to transition ownership of farms, title ownership of farms, into this nonprofit structure, the Farmland Commons, that then conveys out long-term, 99-year where possible, secure, affordable, equitable lease tenure for farm businesses. And so, we're both creating those real estate transactions and nonprofit structures on the ground and being a resource educator, supporter of others who are doing the same. And so that kind of the model, the Farmland Commons, is unique in the way it's different from and pulls from other land trust movements, and then it's narrowly focused on farmland and regenerative agriculture. And then the Farmland Commons is also kind of individualized to place that we are creating these, as are many other communities now, just over the last few years since kind of creating this model. And each of these is going to look different and unique to place in some ways, but they're all focused on owning the title to farmland in this nonprofit structure to provide long-term secure lease for regenerative food production agriculture. And so we created this model at an organization we were at before. Kristina and I worked together at that other organization. We then founded the Farmers Land Trust just about a year ago now, for the sole purpose of building, supporting, creating these farmland common structures that I'm mentioning around the U.S. and a little bit around North America, and kind of connection to others, creating similar around the globe.
Our goal as podcasters is to create a program that makes you feel less alone as a farming, ranching, or homesteading parent, but we can't do it alone.
Supporting Barnyard Language on Patreon helps us cover production costs and ensures the future of the show, but you'll also gain access to exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content.
Your support enables us to continue bringing you the thought-provoking conversations and inspiring stories week after week. So if you find value in what we're doing and want to be part of the Barnyard community, head over to patreon.com/Barnyard Language and choose a tier that suits you.
The Farmers Land Trust, I feel like we really founded this coming from a place of honoring land and people and trying to create a way forward that does that and goes beyond just conserving land to address all of these other things like access, equity, ownership, tenure, like all of these other things that other sorts of land trusts are not focusing on, and then to focus all of our efforts on farmland and farmers. And these new models of land ownership work not in private, but in community, and then don't treat land as a commodity. They treat it as a resource. And so we're taking land out of private ownership, placing them in these localized common structures, and then giving communities the ownership of that land, and then giving farmers long-term, secure, affordable equity and access. And then those localized commons are all interconnected through us as the national organization. And then we're helping other organizations do that too. Like, that was a big part of when we started this work, was we want to do this because this needs happening. Like, the world, people, farmland needs this work. We're going to do it. But also, we want to not hold it tightly ourselves. We want to support other organizations and other communities in evolving beyond what they're doing and to do more and to go further and to hold this way of being in relationship with land too. Because that's really how you start a movement, is by not holding on to it tightly, but like letting other people and also supporting other people in doing it too. And so it's all about how can we move from just transaction of land to relationship with land.
So I think that I understand the concept at a big level, but can you walk me through what it looks like at a local level? Like, how does a project or a local land commons actually begin, and what are the steps that bring it into something, where you've got a new farmer working land that, a former farmer has let go of in some way? How does that actually work on the ground, like on the actual piece of land that you're talking about?
Really, so any work takes people, land, and community to make it possible, and it takes all three of those pieces to be viable and possible. And so, for us, at times it's the farmer, with or without land, that's the point of contact. Other times it's someone in community, a nonprofit organization or ag support organization, or community members of a farm, and other times it's owner of farmland who may not be farmer, or maybe their parents or some generation was, but they're they're the owner of farmland, but they're not either farming anymore or never did. And we get that outreach from them. And then we work to bring together people, build connection to bring that, land, community, farmer business together. So all of our work is based on the land transition into this nonprofit structure. So it's dealing with a transfer of land, and it's dealing with these different components. So it's transferring, the business type, who the farmer is on the ground, whether there was a farmer to begin with or not. It's moving land into the structure so farmer can get long-term lease. So a lot of our work up front is pulling together, like, who is going to be that future farmer? Individual, business, of nonprofit, for-profit, cooperative, whatever the structure might be, or multiple farmers that are served by that, or a community organization. But who is the farmer, and who is the land? And then who are people, organizations who can come together to volunteer to incorporate this nonprofit entity? And so we bring together people, cultivate those relationships, and then we work with them. We have these resources of template documents to create the nonprofit structure, to create the agreement. So then we're working with those people to finalize the bylaws and articles of incorporation and aspects to create that nonprofit entity. So, that's a community effort with us as a resource guiding them. And then we're also working with that farmland owner who's at that point of transition to come up with an agreed to plan for transfer of the farm. And that might be a donation, it might be a discounted sale, it might be something where they stay on and have a life estate to live there, but the land transfers, allowing next farmer, farm business to come onto it. But it's working with that exiting farmland owner to come up with a viable path forward for their letting go of land. And then it's working with that farmer to develop a draft lease from the template we have that's going to give them security, equity on that land itself. So it's kind of us as guidance working with these parties to move forward these documented agreements that we have templates to start with. And some people just use those templates on their own to create the structure. Some people have us as guiding, supporting that in ways. Some people have us kind of integral to creating that and incorporating that, and a nonprofit involved in that. But it's, bringing together people, moving forward these documents, and then legally incorporating a nonprofit, legally transferring real estate, legally conveying lease out. And there's a lot more to it, but that kind of frames the steps in some ways.
How do you guys deal with agreeing on production practices, because having seen more land trust work in the Midwest, I've seen both, where the producer agrees to one thing and then once everything's signed does something at least certainly outside the spirit of the agreement, if not fully outside the letter of the agreement, but sort of that possession being 9/10 of dealing with the lawyers, because it doesn't really change the law, but it sure does change who's going to throw money at it, versus, non-tenant landowners who want to rent the land, but they want 58 different conditions to be met, and they don't have any money invested in if those conditions reduce the crop yield, or if the weather's bad, or, they're not invested in labor, they're not invested in any outcomes of the way they want things done, but then they're complaining that they can't find tenants because they have, nobody really wants to agree to that many restrictions from somebody else. And farmers especially, I think, are not in business to be told what to do.
Totally. These are such good questions and points that you're bringing up. Definitely. This Farmland Commons work, the work that we do at the Farmers Land Trust, is all about removing the number one barrier to farming for young and beginning and farmers around the country, which is the land access piece. The high cost of land to acquire land, the high cost of land to market lease land, like that is such a burden, and farming is not the most profitable business as it is. And so removing that barrier, then farmers are able to do more of the ecological, regenerative, biodynamic, organic practices that maybe are not as profitable, but are better for the land and the ecosystem. And so that is one part of that. And I also just am going to go on like a little side tangent here of like, that part about landowners wanting so many things, like we get reached out from landowners all the time that are like, I own this land and I want a farmer to farm it. Like, of course you do. Of course you want a farmer to come build your soil, produce food on your land, make it beautiful. Like, of course you want that, but what are you actually offering? And so we only work with landowners who are willing to let go of title ownership and to move it into these localized farmland commons, because farmers do want and need independence. Exactly what you're saying. Like the type of people who go into farming, they need autonomy, and they need to know that they have not just long-term security that is needed to like grow their business and the type of crops that they want to grow, but they also need that day-to-day independence and freedom to operate in the ways that they want. But as far as stewardship and use goes, to that section of your question, these farmland commons are created and incorporated with many different legal agreements layered on top of one another. And so in each step of the process, there are stewardship agreements and also conservation language that speak to shared values and principles as a very base foundational layer. And then beyond that, the kind of agriculture that will be used and performed on the land. And throughout all of those, the farmer who will be stewarding the land is part of creating those. And then the landowner, who is usually a farmer, is part of helping create those as they exit. And that building of relationship and trust very oftentimes leads to finding out if we are setting this up with maybe a wrong person, and can rectify that along the way. But then, like, worst case scenario, it gets to a point where farmer has agreed to these many layers of stewardship practices and use and conservation, and then they don't do it, just like any other land trust would. That local commons board is responsible for oversight and ensuring that the practices that are spelled out are actually followed through. But we do find that because it is such a practice and act of building relationship and trust, and that the farmer is such an intrinsic part of it throughout the model, that is not an issue that comes up. But I'm sure it will. It just hasn't been around long enough. I'm sure that issue will come up.
Well, I'd add too that, so a couple kind of broad concepts to this is, one, as Kristina, you touched on, like, it's moving land out of private ownership into community nonprofit ownership. So in doing that, it's also removing private control, and that private control and the kind of dominance kind of culture that we exist in creates that separation in so many ways, and creates this kind of projecting something, requiring something on someone else, and then they're responsible to do that. We're moving, land out of private into community. So the community, which is the farmer, which is other agricultural partners who are aligned around regenerative practice. It's other land trusts who are more local to that area. It's other food systems organizations who value that regenerative, chemical-free food, are part of that entity. So it brings together instead of separating people around common goals. And it's not going to work for everyone. Like those farmers or farmland owners who are simply in it for production metrics or financial metrics, or, open to whatever the market will demand. Like, this model is not going to work for them. We're solely focused on farm landowners, farmers who want to carry out community-centered regenerative agriculture. So that's only a fit for some. The other component is that the use of the word commons for us in the Farmland Commons Model is not meant to describe kind of a commons landholding as in Europe, say, or in the New England town greens, the town commons for shared use. It's the land itself is leased out to individual farmer or farm business, and they have autonomy to operate their business. There may be a lease out to an organization that subleases out to many farmers, but that's their decision to do. So it's not creating a structure for common shared land use as it has been used, in since feudal times forward in many ways. The commons in our space is being used to describe the structure, like people, farmer, community organizations, other partners are coming together to agree upon the terms in the lease, the terms around stewardship and agricultural practice, and then they're coming together to monitor those. So for those that don't want to be part of community with shared values and common purpose, this isn't going to be for them. And those would be the ones who are, open to change or open to other agricultural practices. We're only kind of working with and attracting in those that have that value system around some commons values, some commons management, some commons care for stewardship of land.
I would love to add too that this model, like all of our work, the very basis of this model has all been about how to put farmers in the driver's seat, how to give farmers that independence and autonomy on land that they need to be able to run their business, while also holding land in perpetuity for regenerative agriculture, while also trying to do that conservation sort of stuff. And I think it's been such a balance while creating the model, while creating the legal templates, while working with attorneys, while working with networks and partners throughout the country, of how do we protect the land enough through these legal agreements? How do we put enough power in community through these legal agreements, while also making sure that the farmer has enough independence and freedom and voice? And that balance is so interesting to me. And because, like a conservation easement is exiting landowners, taking their hand and reaching as far into the future as they possibly can to control what happens. And I don't want to do that. Like, we don't want to do that with this model. Like, we want to hold values around stewardship and conservation and protection, but also we don't know what the world will be like 100 years from now. We don't know what people will be dealing with. And there are many ways in the model and throughout the legal documents and throughout how this works that give farmer more power and more voice and more of how the direction of how this goes. And I love how we have found so many ways to do that for the farmer. But I will also say, I do think it is so interesting how everyone, when they ask questions about it, when they start to engage with it, when we start to talk about it, are always like, well, how do you keep the farmer from doing this? And we need to make sure the farmer does this. And we need to do that. And it is so fascinating to me because I am an organic biodynamic farmer. I know and respect many, many other organic biodynamic farmers who do things very differently than I would ever do. Like, even within my own community of people I love as farmers and respect as farmers, I am shocked at the amount of plastic they use. I am shocked at the type of water they use sometimes. I am shocked at, like, XYZ. You could go on about their cattle care or about their rotational grazing or, like, whatever it is. And so to think that we can prescribe uses and stewardship down to the pinpoint that this, like, patriarchal capitalism colonial wants us to have to control, like, is crazy to me. Like, we need to be able to give people freedom to do what they want to do in the best ways that works for them, while also holding protection for land and ecosystems. And so that balance is tricky, but it's important.
I think that makes a huge amount of sense, because I'm even thinking of it as someone who's an intergenerational farmer, where my kids will be 7th generation on the property that we're on. But if you look back, 50 years, 100 years, this farm looks completely different. And those people were doing the best with the technology they had, with the knowledge they had, with the land, with the animals, with the soil. So yeah, we can't look forward 50 years because our climate is going to be different. Technology is going to be different. People are going to have different resources available to them. So we can't say, well, this is the best way to farm today, and everyone's going to have to do it that way. And 50 years from now, it's also going to be the best way to farm. So they're going to have to keep doing it that way, because we're going to have completely different knowledge. And you're right. We shouldn't determine what's the best for our future generations, because we don't know what that is going to look like. And we have to trust that the people who are on the land today are going to do their best. And the people who are there 2 weeks from now and 20 years from now are also going to try to do their best with the resources that they've got. And it's not the same for everyone, and it's not the same through generations or any of those things. I think one of the interesting concepts I wanted to touch on was the idea of making land access more equitable, because we know that most land is owned in North America anyway, is owned by white people. So what about the Farmland Commons and this Farmers Land Trust concept is working towards making land access more equitable for all people?
Couple things. So one, our work is all at that point of transition. So, there's a lot of work to try to work with existing farmers for them to share some of their land with new farmers or beginning farmers, or ways to support mid-career farmers to get equity or security in land. Like, there's so much farmland in transition of ownership right now because of the age demographics, because of the loss of farming that's happening across North America and beyond, that we don't have to create that opportunity for something new. We simply have to create that something new. Like, there's so much farmland in transition of ownership every single day. How do we focus on that point of transition to bring about a more equitable pathway for the future of that land, instead of kind of patchwork of programs to support existing cycles only to be lost at that point of transition into the future? Like, the point of transition is when so many farms are lost, land falls out of agriculture. That point of transition is also the opportunity for something new to bring into kind of new ownership, new tenure, new equity forms. So that's part of it. For us, another big part of it for us is that so much of our world is being commoditized and extracted to the point of our own demise and extinction. And at some point, hopefully we stop, and we stop seeing everything as an asset to be commoditized and extracted, exploited. At least in our work, we're working to create that alternative. So a big part of equity in our work is reframing the value of farmland. We need to stop treating farmland as an asset that can be commoditized for its production values, for its extraction values, for its appreciation for development or other uses values. We need to treat farmland as a community asset for food production and ecosystem health and all these other benefits that it provides that we say we value, but that's not part of the equation when it comes to the point of transaction. At that point of transaction, farmland is valued as like the highest and best value for development, exploitation, extraction on the market. And if it continues on that cycle of how we value farmland, how can we ever get at true equity? So our thought is we need to change cultural beliefs, understanding around the value of farmland into that community value. And through that, equity can be addressed in different ways. Without that, we can never truly get at equity. You know, we're all on stolen land. We don't even discuss that point in our equation. And yet we talk about land justice and equity without even talking about the fact that we're on stolen land. Like, we need to recognize the cycle we've perpetuated for the last 500 plus years, break that in a way, and then live into these ideals we desire.
Yeah, we talk to landowners a lot, and since 98% of landowners are white people in this country, it's usually white people that we're talking to who are landowners. And, you know, the goal and the focus is to swing that pendulum, to move that pin. Like, and it's important that we push on that with landowners of like, if you are going to move this land, let's move it into the hands of people who have been excluded from land. Let's move it into the hands and hearts of people who have been excluded from land. And yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, we have in our work seen white people give land as acts of reparations. And that is so healing, not just for the people receiving it, but for the landowners who are moving that deed too. And for the land itself, like land as reparations is the most healing medicine that there is.
How do you address, though, like you mentioned before, agriculture is not the most financially rewarding career. How do you address the people who their land is their potential retirement? The land is the way they're going to fund their old age. The land is maybe the only thing they have at the end of their career that has any value that is going to support them in their old age. Are there ways to transfer land in ways that also value the work and the value, the economic value that person is going to have to depend on?
Yeah, of course. It is about what are the priorities here, because of course the land has value, but do they need the top dollar market value that land can go for? Or are they willing to get what they need to comfortably retire? And most farmers have lived modestly their whole lives, and their priorities are not being able to go on cruises and visit. Like, they want to just live comfortably on that land that they love, that they have loved for decades. And so many times it's not like a secret, what am I trying to say? There's not like an answer that it's just a fundraising. Like, we agree to a cost that they can exit the land comfortably and have a comfortable retirement, because they don't need that full value, and they see that too. And so we're willing to meet them at that place. And you would be shocked, like, exiting farmers whose farms are worth millions of dollars are happy if they just get $100,000 to live off of. Like, they're super happy. But mostly it's donations. Like, we're saying, like, oh, farmers need money to retire. Like, a lot of them have it, even though it wasn't a super lucrative business their whole life. Like, they have enough money, and they genuinely are able and want to donate their land fully to this work, to these common structures for regenerative agriculture in the future. Like, we talk about it like there's no other way other than to sell it on the open market. Like, that's just not true. We talk to farmers all the time, all over the country, who are wanting to donate their land to this because they can and because they know it's important. It's like, what values are actually important to us? And let's move in action in that direction.
Our work focuses on equity for everyone. So it's equity for the exiting farmer. Like, they need to have a financial equitable path to exit. Our work cannot focus on equity for the lender. So those farmers who have leveraged everything they can because of the market value of their farm and are holding that in debt, and not by poor choices, but simply to compete on the market in so many farm production industries. Like, that's the realities of consolidation and market pressures, and so much on farmers that we can't help that are out on the landscape. But those farmers who have had to use the market value of their property to indebt the business simply to survive, like, ultimately that bank, that lender, holds the decision of what happens to that property. Like, we as an organization, other nonprofit land trusts, like, cannot compete with that market value, whether it's asset equity value or it's debt value held by a lender. Developers are going to win those, speculators, financial interests are going to win those transactions every time.
Yeah, that's true. If that land has been used as a piece of equity, which that's is the farmer's choice to do. Now, when it comes to the person who then has the lease,
right,
they don't have that option then, right? The land can't be used as something to borrow against, so their capacity to borrow money compared to someone who would own their own land would be reduced. Is that accurate?
Yeah, fully. That they're in the they don't have the debt of owning the real estate, so they're not servicing that, so they don't have that debt on their balance sheet, but they also don't have the equity to borrow from. Most traditional lending wants real estate and the ability to foreclose on that real estate if the debt is not serviced. Like, bank wants all they can get and more, of course. Like, they'll take the fixtures in the house as well as the land, like, that's the reality of things. There are some community lenders, there are some social lenders who will, and more, but it's such a small number right now, but more and more are popping up, who are focused on creatively lending to the farm business assets that do not include real estate, and seeing a secure lease as being security for the farm in the way that other business sectors lease or buy real estate all the time. And there's lenders that provide money based on their business assets. So it's thinking about a farm as any other business sector that has assets beyond the real estate, and the real estate cannot be that primary asset used to leverage debt.
Sure. Now, what about when it comes to, like you said, those on the ground assets, things like greenhouses, barns, homes, those types of things that are already on the property? Are they are treated as part of that lease, and those assets can be used kind of, I suppose it would depend on the arrangement, but how do those things get taken into account?
They, depending on who built them, whose capital created them, would be who owns them. So part of our work, which is similar to a community land trust, is that ground lease structure where if farmer builds a house, they build a barn, they build a shed with their capital, that's something they own. It's permanently affixed to that ground, but it's ownership in the same way, a condominium or a townhouse or other real estate that's separated land from buildings is owned. So they would own those. Those would be assets that they would sell, transfer at the end of their business time.
Right. I was going to move us into some of our more parenting related to questions, but I wanted to just check in and see if you felt like there was anything either of you wanted to cover in terms of farmland commons stuff before we move into kind of the parenting side of our chat.
I feel good about this. I think it's so fun because we always get interviewed for podcasts about like our work and the model and this, and like to be able to be on this podcast and talk about things outside of that, like us as people, is just so fun.
I just wanted to share for a moment on your question of like, how does a co-directorship work? For nonprofit organizations in the US, there's so many requirements of operating, running, developing that business that, traditionally have been like, there's one director and everything falls to that person. And it's in a for-profit business of similar size, you'd have multiple department heads or different people holding work. But to move out of that traditional nonprofit structure of one director to share that work in all the different ways that a nonprofit has to operate, has to hold themselves, has to kind of carry out the work and the mission they're doing, it's a difficult or impossible task for one person to do. So to share that work and to share that work with someone that, Kristina and I complement each other in different ways and bring different skills and experience to the table, and also share such a passion for this work and a devotion to this work that it really works quite well. It's a huge benefit to our ability to do the work we're doing.
Yeah, I would just add too that like in this patriarchy sort of situation that we find ourselves in so often, it is an older white man who holds all the power and all the decision making. And to be able to have a woman lead the organization too, and like balance that out and be able to have decision making ability and power is really important to translate the work that we're doing too, so that it's not just this like hierarchical thing that a man gets sole decision. Like I just really appreciate having different perspectives, different points of view, and like having women in power and leadership too. And so, yeah, but definitely like Ian said, like I do think that we both have such different skills and abilities that just complement each other very well. And I think that part of the reason that our co-directorship works so well is because we both see that in the other and really value and appreciate, like, you're good at this, I'm going to let you do that, or like I trust your decision making there because I don't know anything about that, and like vice versa, like to be able to say like, you carry that, I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, and there was one other question I had about this. I was wondering about, you mentioned briefly about, I think probably a lot of us have heard about the commons in terms of pasture land and those things like in Europe. But in terms of a model similar to what you guys are talking about, are there other farmland commons models being developed in other countries around the world? And how do they look the same as what you're doing? And how are other places doing it a bit differently?
Yeah, so for the past 30 years across Europe, there's been these farmland trust models developing of kind of national organization and then these local community common structures that hold title to farmland, convey out lease, and prescribe farming practices. There's a Access to Land Europe website that we could provide the link for the show notes on that, but it's a network of most of them now, and there's maybe 35 different organizations in different countries throughout Europe that are doing this now, and some for decades. That's probably the most similar, and where we developed a lot of our inspiration and understanding of the structure and the kind of need for something similar in the United States. There are so many models around the globe of local community common structures and cultural common structures that exist, known within the legal sphere and outside of the legal sphere in many ways. So there's, examples of how to have relationship with land and each other that kind of replicate this. But this is unique to the US in the scale that we're at and kind of our operation of this model, but it borrows from and is inspired by many other local examples, many other networks that exist in Europe and elsewhere.
Yeah, and you mentioned some, but like Community Land Scotland, Culture Land in Germany, like I think have been big inspirations too, like just outside of that sort of. But I just, because you live in Canada, this is making me think about, like, we are in conversation with so many people and organizations in Canada, and there's such a need and desire to use and act into this model and this relationship with land and this holding of land in Canada. But, all of this is around legal structures and legal agreements, and we're finding that the laws are so different in Canada that like this structure is actually not possible in Canada because you don't have those structures. And so we're in conversation in community with other people in Canada who are like trying to explore how can we do something exactly like what they're doing but within our own laws. And I just think that is so fun and interesting to be able to be in community and in this work with people in other countries to figure out how they can address these issues and think creatively and differently using the legal structures they're in, while learning from what we have done and what we're doing. And it's so fun. It's so great.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know this is probably a very difficult question to answer because I'm sure it's a moving target. And you said that not everyone some people are using your templates, but maybe not affiliated with you necessarily. But do you have a concept of how much land or how many farms are currently using this model in the US, like across the country? Is there a number on it? Or is that too hard to answer?
No, I think it's too hard to answer. Like in part, like this work that we're describing to you takes years of time. Like to think about any, family generational transfer of a farm that takes sometimes more than someone's lifetime, unfortunately, right? Like, so it takes forever and a day. We try to move things forward quicker, but it's still a multi-year process to get to the point of simply that land transition into the incorporated common structure and lease out to farmers. So, there's a handful that are at that land is transferred in, farmers have lease out. There's maybe a dozen of those examples around the country at most now, but there's a lot of communities that are in that kind of relationship developing, moving forward those template bylaws, agreements, structures to incorporate the structure, but still in the exploration stage or relationship development stage or document drafting stage of things.
For sure. All right, we'll go ahead and move into our parenting questions because I feel like we could probably talk for another hour just about all this stuff. But we're trying to cover both topics. So, Ian, I'm going to start with you. One of the things we often ask our guests is, what has been or is your favorite part of raising kids and being on a farm around agriculture? Whatever that looks like for your family. Why is food production and, at times raising livestock or being on a farm, why is that important to you? And what do you enjoy about having kids as part of that lifestyle?
It's so grounding, right? It's so grounding to my time and being and self. It's so grounding to the health of the kids and the land. Like it's a beautiful connection when so much is at a point of collapse in our world, to like ground kids to place, to community, to land, to food production, farming. So yeah, like when our kids were really young, we had kind of homestead farming, as I described. Like as they got older and into school, like it's a balance of, it takes a community to raise kids, in many, from parents to family to community at large to school. All those aspects have such a critical part of kids' upbringing. And no one of those aspects can do it alone in many ways. So as we were they were getting older, getting into school, we found a school that was deeply connected to agriculture. And so they would spend days of school at the farm next door, which is this Temple Wilton community farm that was one of the first 2 CSA farms in the United States in 1984. One of the founding farmers is Lincoln Geiger, went on to start this school program after school. And so they spent days in the milking barn with Lincoln and on the land and in school. So they've always been deeply connected to agriculture at home and at school and in the community at large. And that's kept them grounded, kept them kind of sheltered in some ways, which sounds perhaps negative, but in this world, it's such a blessing, and our desire to keep them sheltered from all they will have to deal with at some point. So just to have that innocence of childhood, the freedom of childhood, the kind of real tangible connections to land and food and exploration of those and animals is so wonderful.
Kristina, what about you? You talked before about having one who's a few years younger than mine and Ian's kids. What is really important for you about raising a little one on the farm?
Yeah, I mean, so he's 4.5, and he has zero concept of any other way of being. Like, he has no clue how good he has it in life of being able to just run around in the grass and through the gardens and pick peas and pick blueberries and play with cows. And, like, he has no idea how wonderful he has it, and I love that for him. But it also is so irritating to me because I grew up in such a different situation. I also grew up food insecure. And so, like, I value food so much, and my child does not. Like, he doesn't care. Like, I make him dinner. I make him gourmet meals all throughout the day, every meal of the day. He doesn't care. He's like, food is so abundant to him, it doesn't even register. And, like, it's so beautiful for him. But I also wonder, like, how to instill that he is so fortunate and so lucky. Like, recently he had a moment, he said, "Oh, not everybody lives on farms?" I was like, "No, honey, not everybody lives on farms." And how to instill, like, how fortunate and lucky he is, or blessed he is, or whatever the word to use there. But I have a very good little story of an example. He just recently started going to a little school, and I pack his lunch, and I told him the very first day he went, I said, "If there's ever a child that does not have their lunch, I want you to share yours with them, and then you come home and tell mom, and I'll start packing them a lunch too." So he comes home from school, and, 4.5-year-old, he doesn't remember things. To my very surprise, he came home and brought it up immediately. He said, "Mom, I just want to let you know that there were no kids whose moms forgot to pack their lunch today." like, it did not even occur to him that it would have been because they didn't have food. He so lives in abundance that he thought their mom would have forgotten to pack them a lunch. Not that they didn't have food, but that their mom, and, like, that was, it's just so telling of the reality that he has gotten to live in, that, like, I am so happy for him, but I also am always wondering, like, how can I raise a child that's not, like, spoiled to this, but that really deeply appreciates what we're giving him and then goes on to do good work because of it.
And yet I think that's all of our struggles as parents, right? We want our kids to appreciate what they have. And like you said, Ian, we want to shelter them to a certain extent. We don't want them to have to experience the same things that we did, or have the same struggles. But yeah, to have them also be grateful, I guess, that's one of our lives' works is to try and figure out how to do that in a way that is, you don't want to put struggles on them that you don't have to, but yeah,
No, I kind of do. Yeah. I kind of am like, how do I traumatize this child just enough so that he is grateful and goes on to do good work?
Ian, for you, what is your biggest parenting struggle at this point? You've got kids who are a little bit older. I know that you said that sometimes time frees up, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other challenges, right? So what's your biggest parenting struggle these days?
I think it's a perennial struggle that shows up differently. But, so how it's showing up now is that, well, the perennial struggle is letting go. And how it shows up now is like having a teenager that wants independence and does that through arguing and, like ignoring and doing their own thing and screen time on phone and, like all of that independence feeling into themselves is tough to let go at times, to like meet them where they're at. But let go, allow them that independence is a challenge. And it's like, yeah, I'm his biggest asshole sometimes, and he's my biggest asshole sometimes, right? Like it's like a fight, and it's difficult. So that's tough. The others, like having them, but like teen and preteen side of thing, like they're both not kids anymore. So that letting go piece of like some things you did as a family when they were young, you're never doing again. And like just that holding a memory now, but never again an experience is is tough. And it's beautiful to have that memory and to hold that, but it's also tough to know that we used to do that and we're just out of that stage now. Like they'd never want to do that again, you know, like, but I long to go back to those younger days at times. So it's that letting go and not knowing when some things are done, you know, like younger son Bridger still climbs in my lap and sits there in the mornings and we talk, but soon enough he won't. And older Dylan never would do that anymore. So it's like that piece is about to transition and let go of that too at some point soon.
Yeah, I feel that. I have my oldest is 18 and my youngest is 9. And when he gets home from school, he still wants to have his afternoon snuggle. So I feel like I'm holding on to that for dear life because of the 4. He's the last one who still wants to have a cuddle at the end of the day when he gets home from school. And yeah, who knows when the last day for that is going to come along. So yeah, it's hard to know that some of those things are not going to happen again. Kristina, what is your biggest parenting struggle these days?
Mine is more about mom guilt and mom peer pressure, I think. I mean, because, like, obviously I have a 4.5-year-old, there's a lot of struggles. Like, there are a ton of struggles that are just, like, standard, I think, to having a 4.5-year-old. But I am struggling with, like, the mom guilt of having a career that, you know, spends time working, not on him. Of course, that I feel like that's also normal. But the real struggle I feel like that's, like, persistent in my life right now is that, you know, we live this lifestyle. We live here on this farm. We're very serious about food. Like, we do a lot of things that are, like, counterculture. Like, even my work is, like, radical land reform. Like, I think that other people have these ideas about who I am or what my family is like or what kind of parents we should be. And then, like, associate all of these other things with how I should be in life and how my family should be that are just not real or true. Like, for instance, I shared, like, my son is starting to go to school and, like, you know, that is happening and we don't have any good alternate options. Like, the public school is really our best option. And I feel very judged and, like, kind of attacked at times by other moms because I'm not going to homeschool. Like, oh, I can't believe you're not going to homeschool. Like shock even of, like, despair for me. Like, oh God, that poor child. Like, you're not going to homeschool him. And then, like, with all of the things that he's going to have to encounter in public. So then I just get, like, this, like, pouring out from these other parents of, like, all that my child is going to experience in public school and the terrible food he's going to have access to and, like, the horrible things he's going to hear and all. And it, like, makes me feel guilty, but also, like, I am not a home, like, I don't think I have that to offer. And I don't think that is of interest to me or would be fulfilling to me. And, like, also my child, like, he hates when we're home. Like, he wants to be with other children so badly. Like, he thrives off of other children. And so I'm really struggling with this thing that all of our community has in their heads or thinks, and then, like, what they put on me of, like, you should be this way. And, you know, it's hard because I'm like, you eat at Wendy's, or, like, what the hell? Like, you know, like, why are you judging me for this thing when I know, you know, it's just hard to be judged because then there's also, like, then it goes back to the mom guilt. I'm like, it's you, like, I want so badly to do what's best for my child, but also, like, I think that we're complex human beings that, like, just because you vote one way or act one way doesn't mean that all of these other things that are stereotypes become true then all of a sudden about you and how you live your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, my kids go to public school and I am also not someone who could homeschool. And I admire people who can and make that choice. And for some people, it's not a choice. For some people, it's the only way that they can teach their kids because some kids don't do well in school settings. But schools have been a part of society for a really long time and lots of people thrive there. So there doesn't have to be, you know, homeschooling is not the be all and end all for every child either. So I don't think that, that it doesn't go along with farming necessarily or homestead. You know, there starts to become these cultural associations that it's like, oh, well, if you're homesteading, then you're also homeschooling. It's like, well, not necessarily. They both start with home, but that doesn't mean they go together necessarily. There's lots of ways to do things.
And really, I feel like the opportunities and the life that we're giving our child have equipped him with so many other abilities and understandings that I feel like he doesn't need everything he's going to learn about life from school. Like, so I feel very confident in like what we've already taught him or what he learns from our life, not just about on the farm, but also about this land reform work. Like he knows as a 4.5-year-old that we are on stolen land, and he knows that we make payments every month as an act of voluntary land tax to those people. Like he knows about racism. Like he is embedded in this so deeply too, because this is just his life. Like this is just what it is. And so I feel confident in a good balance too of like, here is the life that you have been, sheltered in, but also you're going to go out into the world and you're going
to, so you don't also have to teach him multiplication. It's okay. Yeah. He can do art and gym and some of those other things with someone else and with people who are trained to do that work too, right? Teachers are wonderful people.
So another challenge I just shared that I'm about to step into, just that end of school year, summer start, like Kristina and I both work remotely from home. So like we have home offices and like need to go to meetings and be uninterrupted and need to have focused time to do certain work. And that's really difficult with family at home. And it's wonderful to all be to work at home and to not have to commute and to all have family at home and connect in that way. But it's a challenge that I find this time of year as school ends. My wife works out of home at the school that my boys go to. So school ends, they all are then home for the summer. And it's wonderful. It's so great, but it's also challenging that rejuggling of schedule and boundaries and kind of ability to focus on work. And then it transitions again in the fall and in the other way. But just it's wonderful and it's a huge challenge.
Yeah, and kids who are too old to really go to camp or childcare or do other things during the week is a different schedule for them too. I am going, because I can't figure out how to get my computer to work, I think still, since the power outage still, I'm going to ask our wrap-up question. So in case we end up getting cut off, then at least we've got that one. And because I think we've had lots of good conversations already today. So, and then I'll keep going from there, but we'll see what happens. So we ask each of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win. So Kristina, I'm going to start with you. What is your county fair dominating category?
I actually did dominate at the county fair, so this is not like a made-up question to me, so I'm just going to tell you that I was the winner. And this is not even like in my childhood. Like, this is like in my adulthood. Like, within the past, like, handful of years. I won the talent show at the county fair.
For what is your talent?
Hula hooping. I'm like, I can do like trick hula hooping, like not just like around your waist, but like I put on this whole like show that included like me standing on my head with the hula hoop around my toes and like all these crazy things. And then I won the talent show and they gave me like a bunch of money and like a plaque. It was crazy. Felt so, yeah. So yeah, I did dominate the county fair.
That is fantastic. I am definitely not competing against you in hula hooping. Ian, what about you? I'm guessing it's not hula hoop.
Yeah, so no county fair competitions on my end, but a real related competition from, like early adulthood. Was living in Portland, Oregon. There was this donut store, Voodoo Donut, that did a midnight donut eating contest to like kick off their expansion of the store. Like they're now as a donut store, like they're in Las Vegas on the Strip. They're everywhere, but this was their, from an initial store to growth around the country. They did this donut eating contest live on the radio at midnight, and I won. So probably like a pie eating contest or something. I think I could fare well at that.
So I'm guessing that's both speed and quantity. Do you remember how many donuts you ate?
Yeah, it was 14. So I forget how long though. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe something, a few minutes time.
That is impressive.
I have to tell you, Arlene, I just like I said, we only ever get interviewed on podcasts about our work. It's very specific to the Farmers Land Trust and the Farmland Commons and this work and this movement. And I have learned so much about Ian on this podcast now. Like all of these, like.
Do you want to ask him any other questions? Maybe you're.
No, but really, to like get to know each other more as people. Like we work together, but like. Yeah, it's just like so like there's never space or time for just like conversation or like getting to it's been really fascinating. Wow, donut eating competition. Got it.
Yeah. Now you know, donuts. Now could you eat donuts for a while afterwards, or did that
I couldn't eat anything for a while after. It was like maybe 2 days where water and tea and
well, and at midnight too, then you can't even sleep that night, I'm guessing, because you're full of donuts.
Because it was like 2 a.m. by the time done and walking home.
That is a lot of donuts at midnight. Usually I would guess that you would have had a few beverages before deciding to eat 14 donuts at midnight, but if there's a challenge.
No, because you had to sign up beforehand, and so I was like, had not eaten, was like
yeah, that's right. You'd gone into train. Yeah, you'd had a fast.
Ready to win.
So I'm going to thank you both for joining us today. And if people want to learn more about your farms, about the Farmers Land Trust, where should they be going online to find you? Kristina, do you want to start with your farm and then some other stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So our farm is Villa Acres, and we are on Instagram and Facebook, and we have a website, Villa Acres. And I'm personally on social media. You can find me too, the Kristina Villa. And then for the Farmers Land Trust, yes, we have a website, thefarmerslandtrust.org, but also we are on every social media, so whichever is your favorite. So obviously Facebook and Instagram, but also TikTok and LinkedIn and YouTube. So find us wherever you love to be on social media.
All the socials. Ian, any others to add?
No.
Yeah, we got it covered. Well, thank you both for joining us today. Katie had some technical issues. We were both having technical issues today. So I'm really glad that we were able to actually finish our conversation. We took out some of the elements of our usual podcast before my phone dies on me, but it was great that we were able to have this chat and to meet each other. And thank you both so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.